So Pete Buttigieg, a presidential candidate who's the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, recently gave a CNN interview and he addressed some popular progressive programs. Here's what he said. He said, Medicare for all and free college tuition plans championed by progressives in the race are quote unquote questionable on their merits and pretty far out from where the Americans are. So I just want to address what Pete Buttigieg said because I think a lot of other candidates, like Joe Biden, Beto O'Rourke, many others who have recently dipped in the polls, so are now mostly irrelevant, but they've been making similar claims about Medicare for all. And I just wanted to address Pete Buttigieg in this clip. I recently made a video about Joe Biden's stance on healthcare, how Obamacare is not working for the American people, and I want to talk about why these other candidates, including Joe Biden, are instead of supporting Medicare for all, are trying to support some kind of public option system. Pete Buttigieg mentioned free college tuition, but due to time constraints, I won't have much time to talk about that in this video, but I will definitely do that in the future because it's also very important. But let's first address his obvious lie. He said explicitly that Medicare for all is pretty far out from where Americans are. Well, let's look at some actual data instead of just listening to Pete's biased narrative. A recent Reuters Ipsos survey, hopefully I'm saying that right, found that 70% of the American people say that they support Medicare for all. I will link this poll in the description. This includes 85% of Democrats and 52% of Republicans. So the vast majority of Americans support Medicare for all, and even the majority of Republicans now say that they support Medicare for all. So a universal healthcare system is not a fringe idea at all, and it's obviously not a new idea. It goes all the way back to New Deal policies and was pushed by presidents such as Harry Truman in the 1940s. Every other developed country on earth has some kind of universal healthcare system. America is the exception in this respect. And I guarantee Pete Buttigieg knows all of this, but he lies about it nonetheless because it doesn't fit in with his narrative. The fact that 70% of Americans support Medicare for all is irrelevant because his narrative is that only a centralist, level-headed candidate can win over Republican voters. You hear the same things coming out of Joe Biden's mouth over and over again. Well, the majority of Republicans support a Medicare for all system, Pete Buttigieg. So his narrative isn't exactly correct. This is the exact reason why Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump in 2016. We shouldn't let that be repeated again in 2020. You know, if we had a Joe Biden presidency, a Pete Buttigieg presidency, a Beto O'Rourke presidency, it is likely that we'd have a very similar situation that we had in 2016 where Donald Trump, managed to basically win the nomination because Hillary Clinton was running mostly on status quo. She was mostly running against Donald Trump, and that she was like, look at Donald Trump, look how bad he is. He said, grab him by the pussy on a recording. He's a rapist. He's a sexist. He's a racist. He's a xenophobe. Vote for me. I'm Hillary Clinton. But of course, she wasn't running on bold ideas. She was running on the same old, same old. Now you have candidates like Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden, who recently said to wealthy campaign donors that nothing would fundamentally change in regards to the U.S. tax system. And I'm guarantee that sentiment goes well beyond his tax policy and to the rest of the policy, because the system is, as it currently is working for these types of people. They're working for the Washington insiders, where they get large campaign donations from huge corporations, especially the pharmaceutical industry, especially the healthcare industry, and many others, oil lobbyists, of course. And then they get elected over and over again despite supporting policies that go directly against the wants of the American people. and goes directly against their needs. I talked about it in the video I made about Joe Biden's stance on healthcare, but tens of thousands of people a year die due to lack of healthcare in the United States because we have a healthcare system that allows people to be uninsured, which is absolutely immoral. And it's obvious, but the data also shows that people who are uninsured die at a much higher rate. Furthermore, medical bankruptcy is like the number one kind of bankruptcy in the United States. All that could go away with a Medicare for All system, saving tens of thousands of lives. Now let's talk about Pete Buttigieg's claims about free college tuition. Also, he's saying that's a fringe idea. Well, the exact same poll found that the majority of Americans support free college tuition, with 79% of Democrats and 41% of Republicans supporting it. So calling either Medicare for All or free college tuition some fringe idea when the majority of Americans support them is just a lie. These policies are only fringe to the DC elites who take huge amounts of campaign donations from pharmaceutical and healthcare insurance corporations. To the rest of the American people who know how fucked up the healthcare system is, who goes to the doctor, gets hundreds of dollars in deductibles, or quits their job and no longer has healthcare for them or their family, they know how fucked up the system is. Or for students who have tens of thousands of dollars in college debt, or parents who are paying tens of thousands of dollars for their children to go to college, they all know how messed up the system is. It's only these DC insiders who either know how messed up the system is but don't care because they're getting so many campaign contributions from outside lobbyists and large corporations, or they just fundamentally don't understand the struggle that the American people face every day. But either way, we cannot let these people become president. So let's address what Pete Buttigieg calls the questionable merits of Medicare for All, because he doesn't really address it, but I'll address the merits of Medicare for All. So Medicare for those who want it, which is what Pete Buttigieg wants, which is basically just a public option system, defeats the entire purpose of Medicare for All. Medicare for All creates a national insurance pool which can use the huge American market to negotiate down drug prices and healthcare dramatically. In a public option system, there's not the same negotiating power since it leaves intact the for-profit insurance market. Now, in our current system, we already have Medicare and Medicaid, but as we currently stand, those government-run healthcare programs are not allowed to negotiate down drug prices or with the healthcare providers to cut costs. So already we live in a system where the largest healthcare systems in the country can't even negotiate down drug prices. So it's no surprise when prescription drugs in the United States cost tons more than in any other country on earth. Furthermore, we're not even allowed to import prescription drugs from other countries like Canada, right across the US border. You have cities that are just miles away from Canada, yet they're paying many times more for the same prescription drugs in the US than they could get it in Canada, which is absolutely ridiculous because Canada has very similar high standards in their drug approval, similar to the FDA. Furthermore, what will happen in this kind of public option system is that all the sickest, the oldest, the most susceptible people will flock to the public option because this is what they could afford, this is what the healthcare they could get since they need it the most. While the younger, the healthier people will then buy into basic, cheap healthcare in the private sector. This creates a horrible healthcare market where the sickest people rely on the government-sponsored healthcare, which raises the cost for the public option dramatically, while the healthy people will buy the cheap healthcare in the private market, leaving them vastly uninsured. So basically, instead of buying, this nice healthcare system that the government provides, The insurance market will then provide a super cheap, bare bones, basic alternative that healthy young people will buy instead because they don't see the need for healthcare because, it's unlikely they need major surgery or whatever. So they're screwed in case of, a horrible accident or, some kind of health complication. But most people, it's the cheaper option, and that's what they'll take anyway. This kind of system would effectively be a corporate subsidy to the healthcare corporations who would benefit from getting the healthiest individuals in the private healthcare market, while the government will float the check for the rest of the people. The Republicans and even the centralist Democrats, well, a lot of them, if you watch the last debate, will fearmonger over, socialism. Well, this is what corporate socialism really is. We're giving handouts to these large healthcare providers while the public option gets screwed. I mean, that's what would happen. What we actually need is a Medicare for all system that eliminates the private for-profit healthcare system in this respect, and instead has a healthcare system that works for all people, where we would have one large market with the healthy, with the old, with the sick, with everyone together, instead of two markets, one with the sick and one with the healthy, This is exactly what Medicare for All is trying to solve, where the healthcare is split between all people, so the healthcare market does not compose of only sick or healthy people, but the entire population, which works for all people. Plus, a public option completely misses the point of Medicare for All, because it still allows for people to go uninsured. It's very likely that people would not be able to afford the public option, or many people would still not have health care or be wildly uninsured, as I said before. Some people just might say, screw it, I don't want health care. In this kind of system, they'd be allowed to do that. And Obamacare tried to force people to buy health care by implementing the individual mandate, which was basically just a tax on people for not having health insurance. But this measure was probably by far the most unpopular part of Obamacare, and also failed to insure the population, as 30 million people or so are still uninsured. And recently in Trump's tax bill, tax cuts, I should say, Trump eliminated the Obamacare individual mandate. So this has been recently undone, and even more people are uninsured now. But this was, by and large, the least popular part of the Obamacare measure, because it basically just taxed people who couldn't afford health care to begin with. So it was almost like a tax on the poor. I mean, it's pretty counterintuitive and pretty ridiculous, and the Medicare for All system would completely eliminate the need for this. Now, let's also address something else, Pete Buttigieg. If you really believe that healthcare is a human right, that I've heard so many candidates say healthcare is a human right. Joe Biden said it in the last debate, I believe. If you really believe that, then you cannot support a public option, since it will inevitably not guarantee healthcare to all people. It's not a guarantee at all. It's a guarantee that if you pay into the public option, you will have healthcare. That's a lot of ways of saying you better be able to afford the public option. There's no escape from it. You better be able to afford it, or you're uninsured, and you'll see what happens next time you visit a doctor. The only way to truly guarantee all people health care is for a system like Medicare for All, where all people are given health care with no premiums, with little to no deductibles, so that people, they go to the doctor when they're sick instead of waiting as long as possible. When you find that lump on you, you go to the dermatologist. You don't wait months until you realize it's cancer. I mean, that's the benefits of a Medicare for All system. It's saving thousands of lives each year, tens of thousands of lives. You can't understate it enough. Just remember that Medicare for All has been shown to save trillions of dollars for the American people over the next decade. And by guaranteeing health care for all people, tens of thousands of lives will be saved. Finally, let me just address one more thing. to Pete Buttigieg and the other candidates who say they support a public option plan as an eventual pathway for a Medicare for all system. And I've heard this a lot. Well, Medicare for all is unrealistic. First, we need to pass some kind of midway thing, like a public option, blah, blah, blah. I mean, Obamacare was kind of supposed to be the intermediary between what we had before and, Medicare for all system. I guess, some people were arguing that it was kind of a pathway. Then you have Pete Buttigieg and Joe Biden saying that we need another pathway after Obamacare before we get to Medicare for all. So it's like, how many paths do we actually have to go on until we just get what we want, which is healthcare for all Americans? If every other developed country on earth can guarantee healthcare to all citizens, then how can you sit there and tell me that America can't do it when we're the richest nation in all of human history? And saying that they support a public option as an eventual pathway for Medicare for all is just an obvious and outright lie. And I'll tell you why. It's because the Medicare for all bill, which Bernie Sanders has championed, already comes in with a phase-in system where first a public option will be given to the American people before the Medicare for all system kicks in. So it already has built into the bill, which Bernie and other progressives are trying to get passed, a public option phase. So why not just support the bill that's already does exactly what you say you want, which is have a public option that phases in a Medicare for all system? It's literally what the bill already is. And this is just a lie by omission to not say this. We must not listen to the lies told by Pete Buttigieg and other candidates like Joe Biden, Beto O'Rourke, when they try to push their narrative that Medicare for all is unrealistic. Medicare for all has been an idea in the American people all the way back to the 1940s. Every other developed country on earth has a Medicare for all system. Tens of thousands of people die each year due to lack of insurance in the United States. We need a Medicare for all system, and we need it badly. Each year that goes by where we don't have a system in place that guarantees health care to all people, tens of thousands of people die. Time is of the essence here, people. Okay? We can't just sit on our asses and expect people to stop dying. We need to vote in a candidate who can actually make substantial changes to this country. And that candidate is Bernie Sanders. Peace to everyone. Subscribe for more content. Have a good one.